Well, good morning, Senator Lummis. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you join us. Alyssa Farah here with Independent Women's Voice, and I am joined by the great senator from the state of Wyoming, Senator Cynthia Lummis. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Alyssa. It's great to see you again.
Yes, absolutely. So for those folks watching at home, I actually had the privilege of working under Senator Lummis when she was then House Member Lummis in the House Freedom Caucus. So it's a pleasure to see you and to follow your successes and the great work that you're doing in the Senate. One fun fact, since we here at Independent Women's Voice obviously are focused on empowering Republican women in Congress, you are, in fact, the first female senator from the state of Wyoming. Is that correct?
It is, and it took us a long time when you consider that Wyoming was the very first government in the world to continuously grant women the right to vote. Wyoming women were voting in 1870, 50 years before the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. So we had the very first woman governor, woman statewide elected official, the very first women delegates to the Republican and Democratic national conventions, first woman bailiff, grand juror, city councils. So Wyoming had a long history of women in government and very successfully implemented women's right to vote. But I get the great pleasure of being Wyoming's first woman U.S. Senator.
That's fantastic. And as I mentioned, you also were a member of the House Freedom Caucus. And if I recall, at the time you were the first female member to be, as that group was just forming. Talk to me about being a woman in a group, first with the Freedom Caucus that at the time was all male, but also in the Senate, women are still a bit underrepresented. What's that like for you?
Well, because I was raised in Wyoming with a natural resource background, both in ranching and when I was practicing law, I practiced in the natural resource arena and as a state legislator. Those are areas that at the time were predominantly dominated by men. And so I just became accustomed to working with men, quite frankly, more than women. So it didn't seem uncomfortable or unnatural to me to be in groups that were only men. And in fact, the 3 committees I was on during my last term in Congress, I was the only Republican woman on all 3 committees. So my only gripe was we need to elect more Republican women.
Absolutely. And listen, 2020 was a good year for that. Well, Senator, if I could get into some policy issues, listen, the country is turning the corner on the coronavirus, which we're all so grateful for. We're grateful that we've got a vaccine to market, that many millions of Americans have gotten vaccinated. But the next step in this recovery seems to be getting our economy back to where it was before the pandemic. And I think many Republicans would agree, and frankly, many Americans even who maybe supported President Biden, the economy is not coming back the way that it should be. What is President Biden doing wrong on the economy? How can Republicans in the Senate and in the House push back so that we can see the kind of economic recovery we need to see?
Well, first of all, we were shut down too long. If you look at the examples of Ron DeSantis and Kristi Noem, the governors of Florida and South Dakota, respectively, they never shut their states down completely. And in fact, Kristi Noem never shut her state down at all. And as a result, South Dakota has the lowest unemployment, the most robust economy, so we can directly point to the great incubators of innovation that states are, and see that had the rest of the nation done what Kristi Noem and South Dakotans did, that we would not be struggling the way we are now to get our economy going again. And even for a large state like Florida, Ron DeSantis's decisions to be more judicious in the manner in which restrictions were applied and the lifting of restrictions also benefited the state of Florida and Floridians' economy. So you compare Florida to California, two very large states, and you can see directly what the impacts of over-regulation were. The supply chains are slowly starting to rebound, but we've got shipping keeping us back. We've got lack of employment in the trucking industry holding us back. So among the things that I believe they should do is the Department of Labor should lift some of the more restrictive provisions that are typical under Democrat administration. Some of those were implemented during the Obama administration, and make sure that we can get products to market. Supplies are short, raw materials are short. For example, in my home state of Wyoming, a home builder ordered 200 garage doors and can't get any of them. And it's because both the materials to make them and the employment to get them back in production is not available. So the other area where mistakes have been made is having federal unemployment benefits on top of state unemployment benefits, so people are incentivized to stay home and not go back to work. So these are easy things to fix that the federal government should do, that the Biden administration should do.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got nearly 10 million Americans unemployed, and you have jobs creators who are trying to hire, but folks aren't incentivized to get back into the workplace. Now, one thing I want to ask you about, another sort of side effect of the Biden economy, has been skyrocketing gas prices. Since President Trump left office, in many states, we've seen them as much as double. Is there anything Congress can do to intervene?
I'm sponsoring the Power Act, which would help us get past the Biden executive order that shut down permitting for oil and gas on public lands. Wyoming is a public land state in that half of the surface is owned by the federal government, but 90% of the mineral production is on federal subsurface. So when you shut down future permitting in a state like mine, it has an impact. Wyoming is the largest energy exporting state in the nation. That's because we consume far less than, say, Texas, which produces more energy than we do, but they also consume more energy than we do. So if you take one of these net exporter states like Wyoming and say, no, we're not going to allow you to produce oil and gas anymore, new drilling and new permitting, it has an impact.
Absolutely. And for folks watching online, I'll remind you, one of Biden's first acts when coming into office was stopping drilling in ANWR, stopping the Keystone Pipeline. And this has repercussions for consumers across the country. So thank you for your efforts on that, Senator. Another thing I want to ask about is the crisis that we're seeing at our border. You've served for many terms in the House. You've seen this border issue rise in many different situations where Republicans have tried to address it. For a few years under President Trump, it seemed to be in a place where we were building the wall, there was enforcement, numbers were going down. But now we're seeing what's both a humanitarian and a security crisis at the border. What can Congress do to deal with this? But also, what would your message be to the Biden White House?
Well, Alyssa, there is no starker contrast in all of government about the change from the Trump administration to the Biden administration than our southern border. The Trump administration, through its Remain in Mexico policy, through its aggressive detection and interdiction at the border, had really achieved something close to a secure border. You can pinpoint the week that President Biden was sworn in to when this crisis at the border began. We have drug trafficking, human trafficking. We have dangerous crossings at the border. We have children being handed off to people who may or may not be related to them. We have people in containment centers that should never have been allowed to cross the border in the first place, and would not have been had the Remain in Mexico policy stayed in place. You had the Biden administration put out a come one, come all call to people in Central America, and they did. They came expecting that they would be let in, and of course the benefits that come with being let into the United States. So now we're putting people up in hotels until they are spun out into our economy. These are illegal people, while people who are waiting in line to go through the process of entering the country legally are sitting in line. It is a disincentive to legal behavior that the Biden administration has exacerbated. When 17 Republicans went down to the border, they saw a body floating in the river. This is dangerous. The people who are coming across the border have not been tested for COVID, so that's a potential spreader. And there is nothing to gain. There is nothing good about what's happening at the border. And we really can't pinpoint the Biden administration as being responsible for this.
Absolutely. And then one question I wanted to get with you on foreign policy. The Biden administration's been very clear they would like to re-enter the Iran deal, the JCPOA. Since they've announced that coming back into office, we obviously saw the conflict between Hamas and Israel, Hamas being backed by the Iranian government. What can the Senate do to stop the Biden administration from re-entering the Iran deal? Is there anything they can do?
Well, we have a 50-50 Senate. If we continue to make gains on the Republican side of the aisle in the next election, I think we have an opportunity to deny the President Biden's opportunity to re-enter the agreement. But if he re-enters it while we have a 50-50 Senate, we're in a world of hurt. It is a terrible decision. With a new head of the government in Israel settling in, we need to do everything we can to protect our relationship and protect their presence in the Middle East. They are just surrounded by governments that are funded by terrorist advocates, and we need to absolutely double down on our support and relationship with Israel. So that is something we can do in the Senate. And then we just have to elect more Republicans in 2022 so we can stem the tide of bad policy. I was in the U.S. House when billions of dollars were flown to Tehran. That is so nonsensical. It defies explanation. And now we have from the Obama-Biden administration, essentially Obama 3.0 in the White House, implementing policies that were proven during the last administration to be ill-advised.
Thank you. And then one final policy question. I know from your time in the House of Representatives, you've always been a fiscal conservative. You've been a budget hawk and someone who knows we need to keep more money in the pockets of the American people. The Congress is once again approaching the debt ceiling. Is there anything that Congress can do to, whether it's tying that to a piece of legislation or something that can stop the tide of spending that we're seeing?
We are discussing tools that could be tied to an increase in the debt ceiling that might be helpful. One is a piece of legislation that I have that would create kind of a debt commission. Another is an ability to do some entitlement reform. And there are other plans that other members have. I have a bill with Senator Rick Scott of Florida that would authorize governors of the states to turn back federal funds that they don't need, and it would go to reduce the debt instead of go to other states to spend foolishly. So there are a number of tools that we're working on that we would like to see tied to a debt ceiling increase. It's a heavy lift.
Understandably. So final question for you, because I've certainly asked you plenty of what the Biden administration is doing wrong. I want to ask from your perspective, is there any policy area you could see yourself working with the Biden administration on?
Well, I have supported the Biden administration's decision to extend President Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Afghanistan. The people that I visit with who have come from Afghanistan to the United States have indicated to me that we're supporting the wrong regime, that we are in a country that is very tribal and that is not a government that would adapt to a Jefferson-style democratic republic. So we're trying to impose a government system on people that are completely unfamiliar with a Jeffersonian democratic republic. They are used to switching sides when one side or another in war seems to be prevailing. And this has been going on for thousands of years. So I think that we missed our guess about how receptive everyone should be to the type of government that we have, and we are doing the right thing by bringing our troops home. So that's an area where I think the Biden administration has furthered the goals of the Trump administration. But Alyssa, so many things appear to be rejected by the Biden administration simply because they were implemented by the Trump administration. And that is such a huge disappointment to me. Government is an experiment. It remains an experiment. And when we find ways to experiment that are successful, as did Kristi Noem and Ron DeSantis, we should embrace it and adopt it. When the Remain in Mexico policy was working, we should embrace it and adopt it. We should learn areas from one administration to the next that worked and ones that didn't. And it seems the Biden administration is unable to separate its antipathy for former President Trump from the great policies that were implemented by President Trump. And that's truly a shame.
Well said. I often remind folks that one of the biggest accomplishments of probably the last decade was Operation Warp Speed, getting us a vaccine safely to market. And that was under President Trump. And I give credit to the Biden administration for being able to build off of that. So things can work if we work together. Senator Lummis, you've been so generous with your time. On behalf of Independent Women's Voice, we are grateful to have you. Thank you for your work in Congress. We look forward to speaking to you again.
Likewise, Alyssa. Thank you so much.
Thank you.